Tony Underhill as a member of the Underhill School Board, Underhill Elementary School Board. Cliff Peterson is an Underhill resident, and he is a member of the Mount Mansfield Union School Board. He's one of the two Underhill representatives on that board. And at the far end is Peter Geis, a member of the Underhill School Board. The purpose of this meeting is to provide information about the proposed merger of all of the districts, all of the school districts within Chittenden East into one school district, to provide information about that so that the voters of Underhill will have an idea what to vote for, how to make their decisions. And we know that we are not necessarily presenting a balanced picture tonight, in part because we don't know what each of the presenters are going to say, but you will at least have some written information that you can take from here, and you will have some information that each of the presenters give you as you listen to them, and there will be an opportunity for questions and comments to the presenters as we move through. I think you have the schedule that shows that we're going to have presenters, a couple presenters first without interruption, and then after their time is up, there will be a 20-minute block for up to 20 minutes for questions and comments directed to those presenters. Other people sitting at the table up here may also respond if they want. The presenters may not, it may happen that for some questions or comments that they don't choose to respond, and that's fine too. We'll recognize people up here that they want to, if they want to respond, but they'll put their hand up after a comment or question has been given, and they can respond at that point. The vote that comes up November 4th may be one of the more important votes that has occurred for quite some time in this school district, or it may be just a little bump in the road. Different people have different opinions about that, or maybe someplace in between that. You'll note on our schedule that we have blocked out time periods for presentations and questions and answers. And Tony has a watch on, and he's going to be our timekeeper and try to keep us up so that we can get through this whole block of presentations and questions and comments in a reasonable amount of time. Yes. Thank you very much. Our first presenter will be Michael Marks from the Voluntary Merger Committee.
Thank you, John. And for those of you who arrived late, I'm Michael Marks. I live in Richmond. I'm a member of the Mount Mansfield Union School Board, and I serve as chair of the Voluntary Merger Committee. And it's my pleasure and honor to present to you tonight the work of that committee and our recommendation for voters to consider and make their own judgments upon. And so let me start by simply describing what it is we are today. Many of us have only a vague sense of what exactly our school system really is. And if you'll notice that map depicts geographically what we cover, but you'll see there are 6 distinct school districts. And those are each elementary school districts that serve grades pre-kindergarten through 4, each of whom elect their own school board. Each of those school boards presents their own budget to the voters for approval and has governance authority over at least part of what matters in a pre-K to grade 4. Then we have one union school district, and that's the Mount Mansfield Union School District. It covers all that geographic territory and makes the majority, but not all the decisions that affect the education of students in grades 5 through 12, and the students who attend Browns River Middle School, Townless Hump Middle School, Mount Mansfield Union School. And between those two, we have 45 elected school board members. Now, in addition to that, we have the Chittenden East Supervisory Union. Now, that's an umbrella organization established under state law that's supposed to, in some respects, bind us together. But it doesn't have authority over our budgets or many of the discrete decisions that are made by these school boards. And so when you add all that up, we have a total of 8 school boards, 8 separately approved budgets, and 66 voting members to run 6 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, 1 high school, and 1 central office. About 15,000 residents and a total of about 2,500 students. And I might add the Mount Mansfield School District has been in place now for about 50 years. This is what motivates us to recommend a change. If you're having trouble following this, that is the point. That is the organizational chart for our supervisory union. We have our 6 distinct elementary school district towns, each electing and appointing their own board, separately electing a union school board, each of them together separately appointing a Chittenden East Supervisory Union board, and all of them having separate committees, and then somehow all this trying to funnel through to our administration, our superintendent, and then down to school principals, and then down to teachers and support staff. And it's a fundamental concern that we have as a committee that structure doesn't work for students, doesn't work for taxpayers, and doesn't work for true community control. This is what we're trying to replace it with. And it's a very simple chart. We would take the 5 communities, each of them would elect on a proportionate basis a representative to a union school district board. They in turn would hire and supervise the superintendent of schools, who in turn would supervise the principals, and we would go down to our teachers and support staff. So the purpose of this is to streamline our governance in our Mount Mansfield Union area. Now, under state law, this could turn out one of 2 ways. If all of our communities vote yes, we would have a unified union school district. It would simply be that one board governing all of the education activities. If, however, 1 or 2 towns vote no, then we'd have a modified union school district. We'd still have that one unified board. They'd be responsible for everything from grade 5 through 12 and for all the joining elementary schools. If a particular community decided to vote no, they would retain their elementary school board. If 3 towns vote no, then there will be no change in governance. So these are our committee members. It's a diverse group comprising parents, board members, educators, and you'll notice your representatives from your committee, from your community, Jean Archibald, Andrew Rosacker, and Sandy Gillen, who many of you know from her work at Brownfield Middle School. Now, this is an effort that's been ongoing for a long period of time. Some people think this is a new enterprise, but we started working on this 4 years ago. There was a study, there were 12 public meetings, there were 7 community forums, and there was a recommendation for a unification vote. And that vote was held on June 7th of 2011. It was closely divided. It passed in 4 towns, failed in 2 towns, and because under the law then in place, if it failed in even 1 town, it was defeated. So we restarted our work in 2013. We had votes from all the elementary schools to form this committee. We started our work in November of 2013. We've had a total of 15 public meetings. If you go to our website, you will see that we have studied a lot of data, a lot of information, a lot of reports. And some people have observed that we did not consider a wide range of data, but I think if you spoke with any of the people in the committee, you would find that most of them at least think that that is mistaken. Our plan was submitted to the State Board of Education because they had to approve it, and they did approve it, and a copy of their approval letter is up here. And now we're going through a series of 14 community forums. I hope one of you will reintroduce me to my wife at the end of this. I'd like to see her again. But it all culminates in a vote on November November 4th, and it's up to the electorate to decide. Our purpose tonight is to educate so that you can make an informed decision. So let me go to the basic questions that we try to grapple with as a community. Should we unite? And we looked at really basically three perspectives: the perspective of students, the taxpayers, and that of community, of our ability to govern and control our schools. When we looked at it from the perspective of students, we came to the conclusion that we could do better and would do better in a unified governance situation. One of the challenges we face now is that we are not always on the same page. Or getting us on the same page takes a lot of effort because there's 8 different boards. And on many questions, all of them have to be persuaded. Or all of them have to be persuaded to fund something if it's necessary to really support a change in curriculum, approach to studying, or what have you. So we think it's very valuable for the quality of our education to have a unified system where we will be on the same page. Equality is another question, and I think John Alberghini, our superintendent, will address that more, but one of the things that we have noted in the last few years is as there have been more and more pressure on budgets, that there is growing inequality in what each of our elementary schools is offering to their students. We're concerned about that. I think we need a unified system to address that. If we were unified, we'd have one budget. We'd have to make decisions together as to what our priorities are, and we would have to make decisions together on how to fund those. We also think it's important that our administrators be in a position to focus on teaching and learning. Right now, our administrators have to spend a lot of time simply aligning decisions from these 8 different boards. And that takes them away from their core mission, which is to make sure that they are keeping our schools on pace to meet the needs of their students. We also think it gives us an ability to share staff that we don't have right now. One of the problems we have with smaller elementary schools and shrinking enrollments is that as their enrollment declines, they still need to provide some services, but they can't share the staff to do that. This is an opportunity for us to do that. Innovation. We're very concerned that right now, because of this clumsy governance structure, that if we do want to develop plans to innovate, that you simply can't align the decision makers. To give you just one example, right now, in one of our neighboring communities, South Burlington, they're debating whether their students would be better off starting middle school in 6th grade as opposed to 5th grade. It has to do with their maturity and whether the curriculum would be better for them. All the things you think about in educating students. Well, with our governance structure, that's a conversation that can't even start. So the focus on students, we believe, would be better served if we had one system that focused on the continuous progress of students from the moment they enter to the moment they graduate. And Paul Korologos, I contacted him to see what he thought about all this. A long-time administrator here and was the principal of Brown River Middle School, as many of you know, for years. And he said something to me that really captured it, and I decided to present it to you. He said, I often use the analogy of shipping vessels when comparing school district configurations. I compare the present CESU MMU configuration to an ocean freighter, difficult to navigate, very resistant to movement and change. Also, the freighter takes enormous energy to change course and direction. As I understand the proposed model, I would compare it to a frigate, which is known for its speed and versatility. I believe this is the appropriate model for the future of education in Chittenden East. That really captures it. We're trying to create a governance system that's nimble and responsive to the ever-changing needs of students. So let's talk a bit about the needs of taxpayers. Now, we obviously are responsible for a lot of money, $43 million plus in this budget year. We have 2,500 students. Notice that we spend almost $7 million through an assessment that's approved by the Chittenden East Supervisory Union, which again is unelected and is not a representative entity compared to population. So one of the things that we realize is that given the pressures of property taxes, we have to take a hard look. Is there a more efficient way to meet the needs of the school? And we concluded as a committee that there was. Having one budget instead of 8 being able to avoid the waste that you get and trying to align those decisions from 8 different boards, having the ability to share resources, those are all obvious benefits. Beyond that are the benefits that we come from changing our relationship to the state taxing system. And this is particularly important in this community. As elementary enrollment shrink, elementary schools face a real dilemma. They sometimes can't eliminate staff proportionately to their shrinkage in enrollment because they won't even be able to offer the necessary class. And that results in many of our small districts being hurt badly. And if you have questions about that, for example, Kevin Campbell's here, he's the chair of the Underhill ID board, he can provide you with all the details on that. The state system really penalizes small districts in that regard. If we're united together, we are taxed together. And that penalty, which is just a feature of the system, disappears. And we think our administrators, if they had this system, could focus more on wise spending. There are efficiencies that can be obtained, but when you have your administrators spending too much time on other things, we can't direct their resources to the issues that matter to us. We think it would provide tax rate stability, because one of the challenges that small municipalities face is one fluctuation in their enrollment can create a huge increase in their taxes. Again, if we're pulled together, that tax rate stability is much more achievable. And of course, there are tax rate incentives. Now, they're short-lived, but the state is going to provide us, at least every district who joins, with an 8-cent, 6-cent, 4-cent, and 2-cent reduction in homestead property taxes for the first years following unification. And in these days, that's valuable. And we've calculated tentatively, because we're still discussing with the state what is the process used to actually calculate this, but we calculated what the reduction would be on the assumption that we're using the current year budget. And if you'll notice, go to the column first year savings per 100,000 house site, which is at the bottom there. You'll see the figures for Bolton, Huntington, Richmond, Jericho, Underhill ID, and Underhill itself. So it does produce net tax savings for each of the communities who join. We also looked at the issue that some people have framed as local control. And we framed it somewhat differently. We said, we're a community. Can we do better? We're a community in Mount Mansfield, and we have been for 50 years. Is there a vehicle that really gives us the opportunity to have more effective control over our schools? And we noticed that one of the problems with our current system is just who is accountable, who's responsible for a particular decision. You may say, well, I got to check with the CPSU, I have to check with the MMU, I have to check with my elementary board, and you may not get a straight answer because it is so complicated. We think the MMU model works. We think if we have 15,000 people in a community who work together for 50 years, that they can work together to manage 2,600 students, and that a single board with proportionate representation can be accountable to all. In effect, what we think we're doing is trading town control over part of the school system for meaningful local control by a cohesive community over all of the school system. So you'd like me to wrap this up? So that's, okay, then I will wrap this up for you. That's the chart we want to replace. You can look up here, that's the chart of how many school board members we'll have if we do this. And to close, it was approved by a 14-1 vote, endorsed by those school boards. 2 of the school boards, including this, have not yet taken an action. So I thank you for your attention, your consideration, and when we reach that portion of the program, I'm happy to answer questions. And I'll stay afterwards if you don't have an opportunity to ask them in the public forum. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me okay? I'm Meg here from Huntington. It's been a real pleasure to be invited here tonight. I wrote the minority report. Did any of you read that? I don't want to repeat myself too much, but I will state a lot of those points. Basically, my intent is to show you that I think we can do a better job. You're having a hard time hearing me? Okay, you want to come closer?
All right.
Okay. That we can do a better job planning a unification. The committee has a lot of really good goals that I believe in. I'm not against the concept of working together. The minority viewpoint does not criticize the good intentions that underlie the merger proposal, but instead I argue that potential problems exist in the articles as they're written. The cost-benefit analysis is inadequate. The timeline for implementation, getting the new board up and running, is too rushed. We could accomplish most of our goals actually within our existing supervisory structure, or we could certainly look into that more. And we could save Vermont taxpayers almost $2 million if we don't do this. Because remember, our savings are coming from taxpayers. Our school communities will be better served and more successful union school district can be formed if we allow more time for more thorough research and thoughtful problem solving. It's easy to agree on our shared goals: equality of educational opportunities for all students, regardless of town of residence, more cost-efficient use of resources and improved administrative efficiency, and an excellent 21st century education. It's also easy to agree that we want all this while reducing our ever-growing costs, as described in higher per-pupil spending. So what are we doing well now? Where can we improve in our fiscal efficiencies and in educational outcomes? In recent years, CESU has undertaken to share services where possible. We've done a very good job with that. There are many examples of successful coordination of services overseen by the superintendent and the central office. What additional sharing could be accomplished, and where can we do better under our existing SU structure? That's what I'd like us to ask. Currently, our superintendent coordinates carousel meetings a couple of times a year where our elementary boards work together. We could do that more often and address the problems that we perceive. Consolidation of supervisory unions has been touted by the state as a cost saver. This is a false argument. They say that we're going to save money by cutting administrative costs. We will still have the same number of administrators in our supervisory union when we change over to a unified union. The cost-benefit analysis indicates potential savings in administrative areas for this merger of about $323,000. That's less than 1% of all our budgets combined. What it doesn't ask is, will there be new and different administrative duties that will be added as a result of the consolidation, which we haven't analyzed, requiring the same or more staffing, new computer programs, and so on. Even without these new costs, though, the administrative savings are negligible. One of the most notable cost savings that's listed in the cost-benefit analysis is the potential net reduction from school closing, an estimated savings of about $540,000. Again, this is only a little over 1%. But why is this being mentioned? There's no discussion as to what school might be closed, why it would be closed, what the rubric would be for closing that school. It's my sense that if we hold off and do more study, that we can more thoroughly and openly discuss that issue so that we're all on the same page and we understand. The report also presents a chart of estimated impact on local taxes, which Michael presented. It's important to realize that those savings in the chart that's presented, it's just the 8-cent savings in the first year. Those savings disappear very quickly, and furthermore, every tax break that we get from Montpelier is paid for by other taxpayers or paid out of our other pocket. We Vermonters still pay the bill. As we consider undertaking this huge task of creating a new governance structure, dismantling the one we have, consider the Vermont education monies that will be spent to pay legal and accounting specialists to assist with this major transition. The voters should expect solid evidence that this money, close to 1.8 million by the time we get through the 4 years, will be well spent. Since the savings are minimal at best, we need to look at what better educational outcomes are expected. In the area of improved student outcomes and opportunities, the report presents 3 areas of benefits: school choice for elementary students, the sharing of facilities and resources, and equalized programming opportunities. Under school choice, is the benefit of providing school choice to elementary students in our CESU sufficient to warrant a change of governance? Or could our CES schools build on their cooperative structures now to provide more choices? Our educational staff should be the starting point for this discussion. And further, we could explore these within our joint carousel meetings, where all our elementary boards meet together. If different programming is to be offered in different schools, the voters deserve some discussion of this, such as what different choices are needed and why, and how would transportation and equal access be assured. Have we explored options in our supervisory union to identify what choices are desirable and how we might best provide them? Voters need the opportunity to hear this discussion, including potential costs and viability. Currently, our high school students can access some school choice options, technical ed, for example. But could the system for high school choices be improved under a new model, one that could facilitate more specialized and high-level classes in both technical and academic areas? A well-designed school merger study would consider how to provide better 21st century school choices for our high school students as well, and not limit the choices to the elementary level. Equality of opportunity is a very important goal for our educational system. All our students, regardless of which town or neighborhood they come from, deserve the same chance to learn and grow. The merger will make the sharing of resources, building, and staff easier, but there's more to consider. A challenge of providing equalized programming opportunities for all students will be making the hard choice as to what to keep and what to cut. We need to understand where the inequalities and differences currently exist in order to project what programming should be expanded to all schools and which programming might need to be cut back to make it equal. Cutting back can mean reduction in supplemental staff for enrichment programs or fewer classroom teachers, larger class size. Voters need to understand the potential costs of equalization, the cost of leveling up or leveling down, to see what equalizing programming opportunities will actually cost. Technology. It is agreed that technology is a vital component of our 21st century communications and education, and that schools must invent an adequate, up-to-date equipment, infrastructure, and knowledgeable staff. The question that has not been addressed, however, is what will it cost to get all our schools to the same level? What should we voters expect this to cost? And how long will it take to get there? The achievement gap. We recognize that not all children come to school with the benefits provided to the most fortunate children, and some struggle with disabilities that require unique and dedicated oversight. How will this merger provide more for our most needy students, those who are currently not thriving? This is one of the biggest concerns of our state educators in general. Will we see additional enrichment activities, guidance services with supplemental help in academic areas? Does this merger expect to provide programming for those students? And if so, what will it cost? Unfortunately, the merger proposal is vague and unclear about how it will achieve more equalized educational opportunities, school choice, and better options to tackle the achievement gap. and what these changes will cost. Now I'd like to talk about governance and local control, because after all, we're talking about how we govern to create good education. The new system will, as Michael said, create a 15-member board. That board will replace all our elementary boards, and 15 people will make the decisions that are now being made by 45. While it's true that our high school district has successfully worked together for some 50 years, building and sharing our middle and high schools, providing centralized campuses that offer better opportunities than could be achieved in our small local towns, the unification of our elementary schools is not the same. Our communities have historically overseen our neighborhood elementary school buildings where our children spend their earliest school years. With the proposed governance change, oversight of the buildings will be transferred to a group of directors, 15, who are generally unfamiliar with most of the buildings except those in their neighborhood. This will dilute the local connection to the history and maintenance of the buildings. With fewer board members, a loss of about 30, and more school buildings, an additional 6 buildings, there will be fewer eyes on the buildings. With representation limited to a 15-member board, there will be only 1 or 2 voices for our smaller communities. Bolton 1, Huntington 2, Underhill 3 after the IP is disbanded. With represented, and the meetings will be farther away than the regular monthly meetings. The smaller outlying towns are proportionally smaller voices, so issues that are unique to the smaller communities are likely to make it on the agenda of the unified board. The continued participation of the community in our schools is desirable, and the governance structure should encourage positive engagement with the community. As written, the new governance structure makes no provision for local school councils that would have a voice or any legal authority to facilitate any meaningful participation. Bolton will have 1 voice, I mentioned that. Are we confident, so confident, that we are all looking out for everyone, that this disparity between voices in different communities won't create problems? As long as each town has its own common level of appraisal, which is part of the formula for taxation. The tax burden will continue to vary from town to town. So we're together, but we're not. The issue of fair representation needs more careful consideration before we approve the articles as they are currently written. One option would be having school councils that have a representative vote on the board. If we wait and consider that, we might, work that one out. Another concern of the unified pre-K to 12 school board is too much work and too broad a scope of expertise for a single board. The same number of directors as the current MMU board will be responsible for overseeing 9 instead of 3 buildings and principals, and working with issues regarding pre-K to 12 curriculum and policies. That's 14 grades instead of 8. The scope of educational activities in pre-K through 4 grades is vastly different than that of the 5th through 12th grades. So this is an exponential expansion of responsibilities, requiring broader, appropriate knowledge. This is not just a merging of budgets. The new board will not only be tasked to keep up with the old board responsibilities, the old MMU board responsibilities, but will take on the loftier goals of providing new choices for elementary students and adjusting to serving a wider community of parents. Will the issues of 6 elementary schools be allowed sufficient time for consideration? Doesn't the high school board already have a full plate? Will fewer people volunteer for this more challenging board work? Consideration of different configurations for the unified board would be helpful. For example, should there be board members whose knowledge and oversight is primarily on the elementary schools? Okay. And others who have more background with the older grades? Could the board be structured so that each town has at least one of each? What role should school councils play? There are other points, but those are most of my points. The final point I wanted to make was that the way the vote has been written for us to vote on November 4th, we get to vote yes or no. There are people who want to unify, but they don't want to unify and end up with some in and some out. So there's no place to vote to say, yes, I like it, but I don't want it if it's modified. I think that option should be on the ballot as well. Thank you.
Sandy, if you want to respond, you might move up here in case you want to respond to something. I don't know whether anybody else is going to use the projector or whether Mike might want to refer back to anything.
Well, we can turn it off now, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's time for some questions or comments, and they will give the first choice of responding to those to Michael and Mike if they want, and other people up here might also want to. I'll start on this side and see if there are any questions or comments. And if I go across, there's the first one I see. Would you identify yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm George Still. I'm rep from Jericho and Underhill, former member of the Mount Mansfield Board for about 16 years. And my question is this, it's not really a question, but I think something that you said was very misleading about the taxes and the common level of appraisal. The common level of appraisal doesn't change how much tax you pay. You will still pay the same amount of tax whether you're appraised here or here. What changes is the rate, the tax rate. You still pay the same amount of tax, regardless of what your common level of appraisal is in your town.
I understand. I believe you're charged with the tax rate.
Regardless of what your tax rate is, it would still be reduced. It would still be reduced with the merger, regardless of what your tax rate is. So I really think that throwing in the common level of appraisal really is misleading. The other comment I would like to make, please, is that the Board of Education, the administration, and the legislature have all committed to reducing the number of school districts in this state. It's going to happen. There will be mergers. This is your chance to design it locally. Because if you don't design it locally, it's going to be imposed. The things that have been suggested are around the technical centers. So we would be in the district with everybody who uses the Essex Technical Center. Another option was designed around counties. So we could be thrown in the entirety of Chittenden County as a single school district. This vote is your chance to design a system locally that you think is best. And don't be shocked. If we don't merge now, there won't be tax incentives with the forced mergers. You're going to not get the benefits that are in this bill now.
Okay, next question, comment?
Yeah, question to, your name is Megs.
Names.
I wasn't clear from your presentation as to what it is you're actually recommending. It sounds like you're recommending more study. And I guess my question is, it looks like this has been studied for 4 years. Are you saying that none of these questions you're bringing up have been studied by the board?
That is what I'm saying. First of all, I was very dismayed at the process. We met last month, about an hour and a half. We ourselves did very little studying, despite what you may have heard. We were presented monthly with ideas from our superintendent. All the data was presented to us. All the data you see in the report was presented to us. It wasn't compiled. We did not start the process by asking questions as to what we want to accomplish. So yes, I would say that a open-ended discussion of what can we as 5 communities, 6 communities do to make our education better. Those questions were truly not asked, and data regarding Chittenden schools was not generated in any way that gave us a real picture.
Okay, one other question if I could. What is it about the current situation that you like so much?
I am not saying I like the current situation. I am saying that if we're going to spend a couple $1 million of handouts from the state, and we are going to make a permanent change in our governance, let's make sure we are researching and doing it based on our needs as a school community, rather than based on an opportunity to get some free tax breaks.
Tony?
Just want to clarify something. The process started 4 years ago. There was a committee formed, there was no patient. The popular vote was basically high. 15 votes out of 3,000. Then things, nothing really happened for a period. Although it started 4 years ago, it had not been ongoing.
Let's hear from others. I'd like to hear from others.
So I have many questions, but I think the first one I would ask
Please identify yourself.
Peter Val. Follow on this question of what was studied, what other forms of governance were studied thoroughly? I mean, to something that you could report on.
Well, I think that I take a very different view from what you've heard about what we studied. We started as a committee with the following options. Status quo. We could have done a unified elementary school district where we would have just a group of elementary school boards together. Or we could have pursued this option. Those are the three basic options provided by state law. It became very clear early in the discussions that the committee as a whole did not see the elementary school option as a viable one, primarily because it doesn't address that basic disconnect that you have separate boards who are deciding and maybe disagreeing over, and at a minimum being difficult to align educational decisions between the different grades.
Did you generate a report about that?
We looked at that question as a committee. What we did not generate a distinct report on that, because one of the things we found out as we went through this process, and I mean this with all respect to the minority, but what you heard tonight is what we heard throughout the process. I think if I were to break down the tape of what you heard today, there were probably 40 to 50 distinct observations made as to why we should not do this. And then the challenge is made, well, study this one, study that one, study that one. And if there's anything I've learned, it's the worst thing you can do is give the right answer to the wrong question. The right question isn't whether somebody can ask 50 questions going on. The right question is whether we would be better off moving in this direction. And I think if you fairly look at the minutes of the committee, if you ask your representatives who serve there, if they have a different viewpoint, I'd be delighted to hear it. The committee did look at data on education, did look at what the possibilities were, and then spent a lot of time looking at, well, if we were to pursue this, how would it look? And we debated, we fixed, we changed, we amended, and it was only when we had a structure that we thought was worthy of presentation that we went forward.
Anybody else?
So I have another question about shared staff. You asserted that there's no sharing of staff right now, but I see teachers in different schools. And I myself was an employee in CCSU, and I served 3 different school districts. I'm wondering, what is it about the current situation that is not either not sharing staff or
Let me have our superintendent address that.
We have some staff that are classified as shared, but their time is delineated based on the proportion that the school district is paying. It's not like you could say, we are going to, we need 4 rooms at ID painted. We have the personnel to do it. We're going to work cooperatively and send those folks over to UID to paint the rooms that need to be painted, and then we'll move on to the next project. So there's a level of efficiency that you lose. We do have our teachers that work at Smiley and another school, but their time is If they're there for one day, they get paid for one day. It's not like they can spend a half a day at one school and 2 days at another. It's very specific on what is in the budget.
Okay. So presumably, in 4 years, some schools are going to close, and some students are going to get absorbed into the other school districts. That increases transportation time, and I'm wondering what value is placed on student time. Everybody who works in school has a wage that's priced their time, and that a lot of this discussion is about the finances of spending money on staff or spending money on buildings. What about the value of student time? How do you value that? What price do you put on the value on students' time in transportation, reorganizing schools?
Well, I think this is a question that probably some of the other board members should address. But I'll say this. When we look at this, we truly said to ourselves, will this serve students? Will it serve taxpayers? And will it serve the community? And we looked at all three of those. Now, school closings has been raised. One of the motivating factors, and I'll let others who are here address that, who are proposing this, is that in the absence of this, the likelihood of some of our small schools closing immediately, not in 4 years, is there. And what we think I'll speak for myself, but I think it expresses the viewpoint of the committee. We think that addressing the structure of our school ought to be a community conversation, not something that's driven by the way the Montpelier tax system works. I hope at some point Kevin Campbell can address this because he's the chair of the Underhill ID Board.
Sure, thank you.
Well, just a minute, please. We're moving through here. Anybody from the, okay, anybody else?
I'll go after Kevin if you'd like to speak next.
Well, we're moving over here. Did I see
I
a
just
hand?
wanted to
raised?
respond to the question about increased time on buses if we close the school, and say that right now, if you are in the Underhill Center School District and you live at the north end of Poker Hill Road, you're gonna go right by the IB school, so those kids are already spending more time on buses to compare to this school. So I don't think that argument that closing a school will increase the student transportation time necessarily will hold.
Was it
And
studied?
you'd like to keep this as
That's my
a
question.
time for questions or comments
Okay.
directed to the people sitting up here and not between people out there, if you would, please. Any other questions, comments?
John, I feel like you missed me on
I'll
this.
start over here again. Ready?
I just wanted to make a
Introduce yourself.
Diane Person-Glitman from Jericho, MNU school board member. One of the things that Megs had pointed out or had discussed, I just wanted to clarify, is that there is a purposeful lack of fleshing out what this next board will do action-wise. So when that is expressed as a concern, is they don't say what choice you will have exactly, or what programs will be changed, or how one school could be configured. It's because the merger committee made a conscious decision that they would not tie the hands of a future board in the decisions that it would make. So as you read that merger report and you question that, as Megs has, that was a conscious decision. It's not like we couldn't think of things that we would have fleshed out, but that was a purposeful decision so that the new board could look at all of the entirety of pre-K through 12 and say what's best to get everyone succeed. Is this time still to ask these two people questions? Or is it
No, this
too many
is a
questions?
question that you asked to the chair, really, and anybody from up here may respond.
Okay.
And
So we'll ask
those two that just presented will have priority in responding.
and respond. Okay. Well, I'd like to add to whatever Meg said. There actually was no study. I was there in
14 out of the 16 meetings, there was never any study, there was never any educational data from teachers, from principals, from people in education across the state as to what is appropriate for K through fourth grade. There was never. The 3 or 4 things that was listed on their proposal, K through fourth grade school choice, totally inappropriate. Everybody going to college to get a degree to teach that level of students would never stress specialization. It's the wrong thing to stress. You can't get information from a computer if you can't read. And reading and language are the most important things in primary grades and even preschool it starts. Because when you go to apply to a college, you take SATs and ACTs or other kinds of test scores, and it's the most accurate indicator of success in college even today. There's been lots of complaints about those tests, but they're still the #1 indicator of your success. So they use those scores to consider. If you've got a score of 300, you're not getting into any decent school at all, because that's just, you don't know how to read. And where does that happen? The foundation for that is built in the early schools. The other thing about having better outcomes for our students, who gets better outcomes for the students? The teachers. That's where education happens. It happens in the classroom, and the teachers are involved. No teachers group has been involved in either one of the studies. And to sit there at meetings for 4 years in a row, or off and on during the 4 years, is not studying. If you just get a group of people together that all have a common feeling about this and a common outcome, and they don't read or discuss even the letters, or the people come in and ask questions during the 10-minute comment time, and you never get any answers. And I know how that is in school board meetings, but none of the questions and concerns of the other 50% of the voters voted no, and they don't have the information that they're going to have around this time, next time around. I have written a letter recently, and it's going to be in the Times Inc., but I know that people in Underhill and Jericho and those other communities are not going to read the Times Inc., and not all the people that get the Times Inc. read it. Most of the people I talk to that I recognize as belonging to Chittenden someplace along the line that I see in other activities and all of that say, what merger? What do you mean merger? They don't even know what it's about. The first merger, my husband and I are extremely passionate about education, both career educators. And the first merger study and all that, I heard about it a month before we were going to vote. I never knew it was happening. There's very little information out there to come. And if you come to the meeting, you get a chance to speak for 2 to 10 minutes. If you're the only one there, you can speak for 10 minutes. And I always had questions in here. None of the questions were answered. I printed out reports of the committee's questions. They didn't even answer each other's questions. And so I'm going to pass these around. I want people, because I know my time's limited and I don't want to take up everybody else's questions, but this was created. These ideas were not created by educators. This was created by lay people that thought they had a better idea to save money. That's been proven that there's no evidence that there's any savings of money. And also anyway, I've got a letter here from Dr. Lowe, Bob Lowe from Richmond. He's provost council. He was an administrator at UVM. He teaches in the med school. He's been on the MMU board. He's been on the elementary board. His wife has also been on the MMU board and the elementary board, and she's a professor at UVM. These people are educators, and he has had great success with budgets, very complicated budgets at the college level. It's much more complicated than our simple budget, because there's all kinds of entities feeding into that budget. And he's just appalled at the little information. And I find, and he agrees, our letters almost sound similar, like we collaborated, and we did not. I just want you to see his letter. It'll be in the Times Inc., and mine will be in there too, but you won't see it because you're not going to get the Times Inc. All the things that they listed, better outcomes, more school choices, more opportunity, more savings. Everything with almost out, there probably is an exception, I'll give it that. But there's no connection between one thing causing this. How are you gonna get better outcomes? Your teachers are gonna have more in-service training, because you don't get it by changing your name to MMUUD instead of Mount Mansfield Union District. We're already consolidated. We already work together. Our whole district is 40 by 6 or 10 miles. We've got a huge expansive area. We're way bigger than Burlington and South Burlington that are one district. They can close a school and the next school is still in their neighborhood.
I think you made your point, and we move on.
Okay, my final point is, I want to read you one thing from Bob Lowe's paper. He says, I believe, however, that the term control misses the point. Like, we have a disagreement where local control is lost. For me, the issue is local input to school decisions. The essential question before the voters then becomes the effect of the merger on input when local boards at the elementary school level are replaced by one single central board with a much more limited input from local citizens or as local board members. And you're never going to hear any discussion of elementary schools at a big board that controls the whole district, because of every place we've ever lived, we've been in towns of 20,000 or bigger. You have one board, 7 board members, and it's over everything. The high school trumps everything. You can have a vandalism happening at a football game or something like that. You're going to take 2 full board meetings on that one. You know, when the cheerleaders are caught drinking, or there's a debate about weighted grades versus regular grades.
I think we got your point. Can we see if there's
So I'm gonna pass,
if
I'll
there's a
just pass them
response?
down, and I'd like you to read it, please, because
Is
this
there
includes facts.
anybody want to respond? People? Pardon? Oh, okay. Tony says we're time to move to the next presentation. When we come to the next presentations, I'll again ask you to be, and after that, the question and comment period, ask you to be brief, and we'll start from this side and go on. The next presenter, John Albertini, our superintendent.
So, John and Underhill Center Board, I want to thank you for providing me with the opportunity to speak tonight. And I thank you for listening. I'm pleased that I have a chance to share with you why I strongly support unification of all of our 8 school districts. And it's really based on 2 overarching reasons. The first is my experience. This is my 14th year in Chittenden East as a principal, as the assistant superintendent, and as the superintendent. And I've seen a lot of changes over that time in curriculum, in professional development, in expectations, and accountability. And I have some real concerns that the quality of our schools and the equity across the district is in jeopardy. And I've become increasingly concerned over the last few years as we've seen a declining enrollment in our school system. Some of our smallest districts are stressed, and they're forced to make some really difficult decisions that affect students' experiences in school. And I believe unifying, working together, maximizing and optimizing our resources will provide an environment where we can provide students with a 21st century education. Along with my experience, I've had the good fortune to work with MMU for the last decade. And I believe it is a model that we can work off and build on to meet the needs of all students. Our district is 2,600 students, and we have approximately 15,000 residents. And I believe MMU can govern effectively and support our communities and our students over the long term. I also, based on my experience, really think it's vital right now for us to be able to look at students from pre-K to 12 and to be able to plan strategically for their education over that span as a unified system. The accountability has changed, the complexity of education has changed over the last decade, and I think that we really need to consolidate our efforts in order to provide students with not just current programming, but innovative programming. And I believe that unification gives us the best opportunity to do that. So that's my first overarching reason. My second is based on my own research. Last winter and spring, I reviewed 28 peer-reviewed studies, and what I found surprised me a little bit. There is a substantial amount of scholarly work out there that indicates that small school districts in particular save money, get efficiencies, and realize economy of scales when they merge. And that, when I talk about really small, the research I looked at is 500 students, not 122 students. That's exceedingly small. Certainly there was some reports and some studies that indicated it didn't save money. But you had to look closely at the research and the data. And I did that. And what I found is it depended on the situation and the circumstances of the district. No, in West Virginia, it does not make sense to merge these remote school districts into one. You expand transportation and you have to build new schools. That's not a good idea. In Tennessee, where they merged districts that were 5,000 students and 9,000 students to create 40,000 students, that is not a good idea. And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about building off a 50-year history of working together to support students in grades 5 through 12. If you would have asked me 7 years ago, do I support merging and unification, I might have said no. But my experience over the last 14 years and my responsibility for every student in the district has really had a great influence on my support for merging, as well as a significant and notable amount of scholarly work that is contemporary that all of you can access. So, thank you.
Your next presenter is the principal.
I only have a few comments to make. I'm not a community member. I live in Essex, and I do want to represent what I believe is my personal view and also that of the teachers that I speak with in our school. And I also want to commend our board for being very thoughtful through this process. The school board has always been supportive of Underhill Central and of me as principal. And I know that they are committed and dedicated to the best for our children at Underhill Central. And in our conversations, I also can tell you that they are also thinking about all the children in our district, not just UCS children. When I first started here about 5 years ago, there was approximately 160, and I don't exactly remember off the top of my head, 160 some odd students. Our declining enrollment this year, we're at 118, and next year we go to 99 students, kindergarten through first grade. We do have a pre-K population of a little less than 20 students this year. I'm very concerned about equity. That's always been on my mind as far as what students gain in our elementary schools. And I've been a champion, and the board can attest to this, with our retreat that we had a couple of summers ago. I spoke passionately about alignment K-12, and we had many discussions about that. My view is all children are our children, and just because they leave UCS at 4th grade doesn't mean I ignore what happens to them in high school. We recently had discussions about 9th graders entering MMU and the number of students that were able to enroll in algebra. And we've looked seriously as teachers and administrators as our math program and our curriculum. We have zeroed right in on particular problems on math assessments to discuss in great detail how we are preparing our students from kindergarten through 12th grade to make sure that we have alignment in instruction. Those are very serious topics, and our school board has listened to those components. The piece around the school board and where everybody's voices are heard is very important to me, and I know the teachers and I know the parents of this community. I see it from a little different lens. We have 5 wonderful people here on our school board who are paying attention to Underhill. I will have 15 wonderful people who will be paying attention to Underhill. They'll be paying attention to Jericho. They'll be paying attention to UID, and they'll be paying attention to our pre-kindergarten students all the way through 12th grade. They will have the lens and the vision to guide 21st century learning. That's important to me as an administrator in this district. And I think it's important to every parent and every community member in this district. I see 15 members having eyes and ears in many directions and having greater access to more people with more perspectives that have the umbrella view that can guide our passions together. I think that's going to be a very dedicated group of people who have our best interests at heart.
Okay, we'll have another period of up to 20 minutes for questions and comments. Ideally, they should be directed to the content that you heard there. But questions are, whatever questions are. We'll start on this side. Do I see a hand? Do I see a hand? Identify yourself, please.
John Barber. Just a question about UCS enrollment.
Yes.
I think you said it's 120.
118 plus pre-K this year, which is around 20. 18, I think, Maryland.
Okay. I was just looking at the chart here, and sort of right on the 150, students. So it seems like it's a little less than that. So, and then it's going to fall from that level to 99 plus,
Projected, yes.
plus 20.
Yes, right now, my numbers right now, as our students go to 5th grade and our pre-K students come up, UCS only has 4 students in pre-K right now here in this school. We have some more students in the outlying pre-K school. So right now, our indicators are that we will have a kindergarten class of roughly 18 to 20 for next year. And our students moving up, we should have 99 students kindergarten through 4th grade next year. Right now, we have 118.
Okay. Introduce yourself again, please.
We
You may have
hear
forgotten.
I hear 21st century learning all the time. Everybody's saying 21st century learning, 21st century learning. What the heck do you mean by 21st century learning? You're still the primate that started planting.
You're right, it
weeds
is a
10,000
big,
years ago.
catchphrase for all that we do in education. You're right, it is, and we should really talk about nuts and bolts. Brain-based learning, differentiated instruction, whole child theory, all of those things create 21st century learning, Common Core. So everybody uses that one big phrase, 21st century learning, to lump all of that together rather than to itemize all of those components. It's good instruction is what it is.
So is it any different than the good instruction I got?
Yes, it is very different from what you and I got in school.
How so?
Because students are engaged very differently. You and I sat as passive receptacles to someone instructing us. We learned math algorithmically. We didn't learn conceptually. And students are required to interact with curriculum in a way that is very different. They're very interactive in the classroom. And Peter, you know that. You've been in our classrooms and you've seen that from your daughter's perspective.
Right, but I don't see a difference from when I was growing up.
Well, you must be quite a bit younger than I am.
Okay.
A couple of things.
Introduce yourself again, please.
Okay. Diane Person-Glidman, Jericho, and then you, board member. I do want to say a little bit more about the local control, and I know most of you all have heard me talk about this before. Local control or local input really comes from the communities, the community members and the parents. The board members oversee, but when everyone worries about the loss of board members, meaning that there won't be enough eyes on the building, our best eyes are our parents, and they have never failed to tell us when something was wrong. They know exactly who to go to, and they know how to get things done. They know how to change food service, they know how to plant gardens, they know how to tell you the color is wrong in the building, they know how to tell you when things aren't going well in a certain class. School board members cannot call up the principal and say, I want to talk to you about that. That's not our job. We're not allowed to do that. We can only act within our board member time. We're not supposed to be advocating individually and taking up principal's time. So that isn't going to change. Our community members and our parents are still going to be advocating for our students, for the building that their child is in, I have no doubt. And whether or not we create councils, again, that was one of those things where not deciding what the next board will do. All of those things are open and up for grabs. Another point that was talked about from you, Joanne, and from Bob is that there have been so much outreach, so much either on Front Porch Forum. I extended myself to you, to Bob. I would email anyone who talked to me. Let me tell you more about the merger. Let me give you my opinion. Let me invite you here. Let me send you there. And I think that when people say that their questions weren't answered, or that there wasn't a dialogue, let's step back a minute and remember that it's a two-way street. And it was not always that things were force-fed to someone, but that if they asked, that information was given and still would be. And I've offered that many times to people through phone calls, through emails to find out more. So I'm very passionate about how our families and our communities can continue to be in control of what they need to be in control of. And the board really needs to be answering to policies, to outcome, to responsible use of resources, and responsible care of our facilities. Also, there was a question about where our teachers stand. I'm glad that you brought up some of the teachers as I've gone around collecting signatures. I've heard from teachers who would like the merger, are not real comfortable in speaking up. I just got an email today from another teacher saying, how can I help? How can I help get the word out that this is a good idea? So I think there are still, like I said, both sides, but I really feel passionately, local control will not be lost. And neither will the elementary school kids. Anybody in education knows if you don't have good stuff coming into the system, if you're not working at that front end, you're dealing with the problems later on. And you know me, I'm a school nurse at Essex High School Center for Technology. I work with all the students in the entire Chittenden County daily, and I see the differences. And I will tell you, the more we front load, we all know this in education, from what we're being told and what we're seeing in our practice. The more we work on those early years, the better outcome we're gonna have later on. So this next board will have that job.
John, could I make one comment? And that's that I went out to every school, attended a staff meeting. We added information about the merger in our notes that we send out to all staff. At our convocation in the beginning of the year, I reviewed where we were with the merger, took questions, asked for opinions. I feel like at the school-based level, we did a lot of engagement with teachers to get their opinions and see their views. And overwhelmingly, the feedback that I received was, we think this is the right time and the right thing to do for our system.
Two things that I heard that I want to respond to. One is about school council. The vote on November 4th will approve the articles as written. This is essentially a constitution. It's the legal document that defines what our new government structure is. The governance structure is outlined as 15 board members, and it outlines how many representatives from each town. The idea that we can, as a new board, create school councils is true. However, we cannot create school councils that have any governance role. So if we want to explore the concept of every school having one member who's representing the school council, and that member would have a vote either in a separate school council body, the whole district, or a vote that would be part of the larger board. That has to be set up as the governing structure. Once we've set up the governing structure, we cannot create school councils that have a voice, that has any legal authority. So that's one thing I want to point out, something we could explore if we stepped back and took more time. The reason that might be important, let's just say, for example, that Underhill Central School is designated as a school that has too few children, and the 15-member board struggles with which school to close, and decides students from this community will go to another school, and the Mansfield Academy will be located here to save money. As you who have read the report know, it is the intention to close the Mansfield Academy and move it into one of our buildings, whichever that may be. One of the schools is going to face that issue. Another issue is, where are we going to have the central office? In the plan is no longer paying the town of Richmond to use the town office space, but to move the central office into one of the buildings. The reuse of these buildings will be determined by this 15-member board. While it's true that for 4 years none of the schools can be closed, there can be repurposing and shuffling students. That is not necessarily bad, but if you're from a community that has one vote on that board, you may wish that you had an extra vote. That's the point I want to make. And the other point is, it was mentioned that the committee talked about the unified elementary district as a concept. This is not true. When I was selected to be a representative from Huntington, and our board members attest to this, I came educated about what the choices were that the new law gave us. It included several merger options. When I came to the first meeting, second meeting, third meeting, well, first back to our school board meeting when I was selected to be on a committee that was going to study merger options. I was not selected to approve or disapprove of a modified unified union district. I was selected to help study all the merger options. However, at subsequent several meetings, the committee, I was told, no, that is not the charge that this committee was given. The executive committee has told us we are only studying a modified unified system. After repeatedly bringing this up at several meetings, being told we could not discuss it, we did discuss it one time for a few minutes, and everybody on the committee said, no, we don't want to consider it. End of story. We did not study the real options of the unified elementary district. It may not be the best option, but it's incorrect to say that we studied it. We didn't consider how an elementary board and a high school board could work together and coordinate a uniform K through 12 governance or curriculum oversight. So that's a fact I want to clear up. Thank you.
I don't want to take too much time with this argument about what happened in the committee. I just want to leave it this. We have very different points about the work of that committee. I would defend vigorously the work of that committee. I know that those volunteers spent lots of time away from their families, not only in that committee room working hard, but outside that committee room working hard. And I would not confuse the fact that one point of view did not prevail with the obvious fact that we worked hard to look at what we thought was best for this community. And I'll leave it at that.
I think,
First,
identify yourself.
yeah, George Timmer. First question, every time somebody speaks about closing schools, there seems to be this built-in assumption that what's going to close is one of the elementary schools. Is there, in my mind, that's a very open question. Maybe the thing the board would choose to do would be move the fifth and sixth grades back to the elementary building. Is there anything in what is presented here that suggests that the only option is closing elementary schools?
Absolutely not, and this is a point that I hope at some point this evening that the chairs of the Bolton and Underhill ID Board will address. Because one of the things that we heard as a committee was that if we don't go to a merged structure, there is grave danger that those schools will have no choice but to close. Whereas if we have a unified structure, we do have options.
And then the comment I would make, thank you for that. I think that's your own work on this. I know how difficult this is. That is, you know, I hear a lot of getting into the weeds about how far will somebody be on the bus, what's going to happen. We haven't laid out what the plan is. You know, the point is really that I really want people to grasp is that mergers are coming, regardless of how this vote goes. This is the last bite of the apple with voluntary mergers, most likely. But mergers are coming. Don't have any doubt about that. There's 277 school districts in this state. That's not going to be that way for very long. And so I think what people need to get into their thought process is, okay, mergers are coming. What's the best mechanism for Chittenden East and for us?
Captain Campbell, Underhill resident, Underhill ID, chair of Underhill ID school board, and member of the voluntary planning committee, among others. First of all, there was a comment made about one of the charts that was presented or in the handout with enrollment on there, and the chart talks about average daily membership, and of course that is what is the tax rate based on. It's always 2 years in the past, so our districts don't see the impact of this year's enrollment until next year. So that average daily membership is going to continue to decline, I believe, in this district as well as mine. Something interesting that I found looking at enrollment figures the last couple of months, I guess last year now, among the 3 districts at the northern part of the SU, there's 3 schools. One of the schools has about 200 students, and 100 and 100, 400 students. And when you ask the administration what's the capacity, it's 800 students you put into those schools. So there's a lot of capacity there that we're not using. Last year, the Underhill ID budget failed the first time around. It was a level funded budget. We cut a lot out of it. I think it might have been even $37 less than the budget that was passed the year before. But our enrollment had declined, and that caused a pretty significant increase in the tax rate. That's how property taxes are calculated. And so when the board got back together after it failed, we looked at, well, what's better for us? To tuition our students out and give up, or to cut programs? You know, there wasn't any good choice there. So we depleted our capital fund, and we got our budget passed, and we said, well, let's hope things are different next year. Things aren't different next year. Now we have to fund pre-K, and we have no capital funds in the fleet. So we're in a state of crisis, you know, in the small districts, and I think in Bolton as well. And I think this district will see some of the pain this year, next year as well, with declining enrollment. And when you're in, you know, a state of crisis, decision making is relatively easier, and you can't study everything. Sometimes you have to make, you know, decisions because time is of essence. For our district, time is of essence. We're not thinking about all the great things that we want to get done through pre-K through 12. We're thinking, you know, how are we going to keep the lights on? And if we have a union district here, and we're a member of it, we have a lot more options available to us. First, we get out from underneath that small enrollment number, or more precisely, that small average daily membership number that drives that tax rate up because we'll now have a broader enrollment base to work with. And then we can really make better decisions about how to use our facilities, for one, and our staff. You know, closing a school is, you know, boarding up a school would be silly. I mean, we have all these great facilities, which is how are we going to use them better? Do we have first and second in one and third and fourth in another? You know, all these things open up. But today, in our current structure, we can't just send students to a school that's 3 miles to our south and 3 miles to our north. That's the distance between our 3 schools, 6 miles. We literally have to write a check to send a student to another elementary school, and that just doesn't make sense. And our school board didn't want to do it last year for obvious reasons. So I want to share that. Thank you, Rob.
I'd just like to point out that, Jordan, I hope you will pay attention to this, because you're not feeling that we are talking about trying to create a system where those schools that now have a high per pupil cost because their population has gone down will have tax relief. We're not talking about spending less money on education in our supervisory union. We're talking about paying less taxes because we are tied into the whole state of Vermont. And the state of Vermont, because of the Brigham decision, made a good decision about the fact that we all need to chip in and help pay for all the schools in the state. But we're stuck with feeling like we're paying too much taxes when we go over that threshold. Montpelier has a real problem on its hands. And right now, we hear the governor saying school boards have to cut what they're spending. School boards are saying we can't cut anymore. So there's this fantasy that by doing this merger, and we get 4 years of tax breaks, where our taxes will go down a little bit, and they'll go down a lot for those schools that are spending over the threshold. We have a fantasy that we're spending less. We are not talking about having lower budgets. Montpelier isn't going to see our numbers go down to what we're raising, what we're spending for our schools. It's kind of smoke and mirrors. I mean, we all want to pay less taxes, but the real problem is with the structure of how we as citizens raise money to pay for our schools and what we're willing to pay and how we create an equitable system. I agree that I'm sympathetic to the schools that right now are being penalized. However, if you have an urgent situation that requires urgent action, it's not necessarily the best time to make a decision that's going to be permanent. And what I see here is that we're making a huge governance change that has some big flaws in it. It's not all wrong, but it has some big flaws in it. And we're rushing to do it so that we can get the tax breaks and give some relief, but we're not talking about spending less on education, and we're not really fixing the problem. We can look at how to coordinate pre-K to 12. We don't have to change our governance to do that, but we do need to fix how we finance education.
Okay, Tony says our time is up for that. Our next presenter is Jean. I do remember your name.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
I've been to all the meetings this year except for a couple, and Sandy Gillen went to those. I was on vacation. I do not feel that as a new member on the merger committee and a regular thinker about this question, that things were put over upon me. I was provided with a lot of material, and I read a great deal, and I listened and sort of tried to think about how this could best suit us. I did not make up my mind until this spring, and I decided to vote in favor of the merger for a couple of reasons that I think are pretty good. I have worked in every school in the district except Bolton at different times. And I see us as one unified group of students and teachers and administrators. I don't see us as just Underhill Center. I see us as the whole group of us. And we have had a lot of cooperation with each other, but I think with the unified board, we could have even more. I've talked to some teachers, and one of the issues for teachers is that if they move from one school to the other, especially with enrollment dropping, and sometimes the teacher needs to be let go because the enrollment is just too low. And then sometimes a teacher retires and moves on, and they need to get a teacher from another district. That teacher loses seniority in terms of how long she or he has worked for the school district. So that has happened a number of times. I think the whole idea of sharing facilities and ideas is why we should have a unified board. I'd like to echo what Diane said about local control. That seems to be a catchword where people are worried about if there's no longer a 5-member board here in Underhill, that somehow we won't have any control. We won't be able to input into our school. All of us know how much a new parent, volunteers, people get involved with their elementary schools. That's still going to happen. There still will be volunteerism. There still will be school events. There still will be ways to talk to the board, the unified board. The main thing will be communication with the principal and continuing to have volunteerism and people in the schools. I don't think we'd lose anything by going to this, and I think we'd gain. I need to wrap up. One last thing. Andrew Rosshacker has written out a sheet which explains your yes, no vote. And when you get in the voting booth, you're going to see a pretty complicated looking ballot. I urge you, we're going to try to place these all around, and I urge you to read this because it'll tell you exactly what you're voting for if you vote yes and if you vote no.
The copies over on the table.
There are plenty of copies, and there will be copies.
Okay, Sandy,
I'm gonna stand up here.
okay.
Okay, so I'm Sandy Gillum. I have been a member of the Underhill community since 1971. My children went to school K through 12 in Underhill, or I guess they started in grade 1 and then to grade 12. And then I was an administrator at Underhill Middle School for 15 years and now retired for 5 years. So my perspective comes from those hats that I've worn here in the community. I support the merger. And I support it because I know that there's no governance structure that's perfect. We're going to find problems with the proposed structure. We have problems with the current structure. I believe this proposed structure will resolve some of those problems that we have with our current structure. We've talked about curriculum. This district has worked very hard to coordinate curriculum, K through 12, especially in the core areas. But there are other areas of curriculum that are not coordinated. And we've talked a little bit about that, but I can tell you that as an administrator, where I was primarily responsible for grades 5 and 6, I saw kids coming from the different elementary schools with different experiences that impacted their achievement in grade 5. And those experiences, for example, Jericho had an enrichment program. The other schools didn't. That's inequality. When Jericho had a foreign language program, the other schools didn't. That's inequality. I think this proposed merger will help to eliminate those kinds of inequalities for our students. We must remember our students do experience our system K through 12, and so they deserve to have the same kinds of experiences K through 12, no matter what school they are from.
That's one reason why I support it. Then there are some practical considerations why I support it. I know that, for example, we've worked hard to improve our hot lunch program. We've hired a hot lunch program coordinator. Okay, some boards approved that, hiring of that and spending money for that, other boards didn't. So we didn't have that coordination in our hot lunch program that we could have had if we had a merged district. Same thing for our custodial services, taking care of our buildings. Each elementary school has its own custodial services. They're not able to share those custodial services without problems occurring, without some difficulties. We could, with a merged board, have the ability to do bulk buying for our hot lunch program that would be easier than now. Same for bulk purchases of equipment for maintaining our schools. So that's a practical consideration why I support this merger. As far as holding I think the argument's been made that there's not enough detail in the proposal. As has been said, we don't want to tie the hands of a future board. I would like to see, I'm hoping and I believe that a future board will have the eyes on K through 12 and will be able to more accurately or better able to be innovative in its approaches to education. Done. Okay. Thank you.
Andrew?
All right. Good evening. Thank you all for coming. I'll try to keep my comments as brief as I can. I have been serving on the merger committee. This is actually my second go around on the committee. I served on the committee that also addressed the vote in 2011. I do want to talk a little bit about local control. This is to echo Diane's thoughts. We live in a very small district. I grew up in a very large one. And in both cases, the people who had the most influence on the day-to-day operation of the schools were the involved parents. And I think that that is the case in a large district, that's the case in a small district. And I don't think any of us has any interest in designing a governance system that would change that. So yes, this would change the governance of our schools, but in terms of the community involvement, I think day-to-day would probably look very much the same. I believe that we're gonna have good schools either way. I think we have good schools now. I think we'll have good schools if we merge. I see the difference as being one of flexibility. As many have already very eloquently expressed, this would allow us flexibility that we don't currently have. For instance, I spoke with one teacher who talked about technology in the schools. On the one hand, the district as it currently exists is very capable of designing a common philosophy. If you get everybody in a certain department in the same room, they can knock out a curriculum. The problems that we are faced with tend to be ones having to do with the budgets of the individual buildings. For instance, with computers. We can all have the same technology curriculum, but if the computer to student ratio is different in UID from what it is here, even if you have the same curriculum, even if you have qualified staffs in both buildings, the experience of the student will not be the same. And so while you may have an equal philosophy in both places, because you do not have equal resources, you don't have an equal education. And if we have a merged school district, matters like that can be addressed. I don't believe that a merger would serve all of our problems. I don't. I don't think that remaining as we are will solve all of our problems. I simply believe that by merging, we have a more flexible system and we can explore more options than we can now. Perhaps having a magnet school is not such a great idea. I'm not sure it is. Perhaps having school choice is not such a great idea. I'm not sure it is. But the problem right now is that with the governance structure as it is, we can't even talk about it. There are limitations on what we can do, on how we can use our resources in terms of buildings, in terms of staff, in terms of funding, simply because of the governance structure. And that to me is unfortunate. I do feel very strongly that we do have two boards who have expressed very clearly that they don't know if they can survive long-term with our governance structure. I believe that all the students in the SU, all the students in Vermont are our students. Even if we do not govern them directly, we are responsible for their education too. And so if this is what is best for all the students in our community, and I mean all 5 towns, all 6 districts, then I believe that that is the best thing for us to do. Thank you.
sorting need. And also, look at the new school district, the single board that serves students from all 5 towns and communities in grades 5 through 12. It's been working very well. I do not see why a single board serving students from all 5 towns in grades 8 through 12 wouldn't work equally well. I'm in favor of the motion.
And nobody, Kristen is here, so, Tony? Okay.
Truly, I'm undecided. I think a lot of the things are in this proposed merger. I think it could be better. I wish in particular that like at the elementary schools could have kept the hiring practices that it is. They can now hire anyone they want rather than being forced to take someone being big risk. I think that could be a big loss. So there is a lot of, I think the merger committee, not the people who are here now, but some of the others, handles the public input forum. I went to a couple of meetings, raised some concerns. Diane got back to me with email, I appreciate that. But did indicate whether or not any of my ideas were actually taken up, not necessarily agreed to, but at least talked about. And it turns out a week ago at our board meeting time, I found out that indeed they had to. But I think it was a failing of that. I never knew. And other people felt the very same way. Having said that, although I see some flaws in the process, it doesn't mean that the actual product isn't bad, it's not perfect. I'm still up in the air. A lot of people feel really passionate about this on both sides. No matter what happens, I agree with Andrew, our schools will continue to be good, whether we have the current system or before we merge. And the day after the election, the sun will still is still going to rise and the dog will still
Okay. I have supported all of the, I've supported exploring all of the merger options that have come through over the years. I voted for the last time it occurred, and I expect to vote for the merger proposal this time. The state has put some money on the table, and some of the advice you have is don't leave money on the table. However, we as educators want to help our students understand that we need to defer some of our gratifications, and applying that to the money that the state has put on the table that tells us that don't make that the only thing that you consider when you're making the decision. Clearly, part of the background is that there is excess mortar and brick capacity in this district quite a bit. And so we need to address that to address the cost part. Our Underhill birth data shows, well, our Underhill's population, Underhill Central school population went from 236 about 20 years ago down to, we heard Barbara say, 99 coming up next year. And if you look at the Department of Health information on births in Chittenden County, clearly the same thing occurs throughout the state, that the population, the number of births per year in these 5 towns has gone down about 15% over the last 6 years or so, or from 2004 to 2010. The real reason I support the merger, in addition to that, the main reason is the superintendent's position. The job that we have to hire a person for is really quite a difficult job, with all of the evening meetings and being pulled in a lot of different directions. So I think that's the main reason that I think we we should support this. It'll make that job a much better job, and he or she can do a better job bringing education to our students. Smith?
Right. I may be last.
I think you're right. I don't see John.
Well, no, that's a bad position. Let me refix this up. Let me start with legal. For those of you who remember the book, Christopher Robin, the little boy, is going upstairs to bed. And he's got his teddy bear Winnie behind him. Pulling Winnie by a hind leg. And Winnie is the narrator. And he remarks he's banging his head on every step. And there has to be a better way to go upstairs so only he can stop banging his head long enough to remember what it is. Well, I think it's been thought of. And that's unifying these districts. My own scribble, before John Albertini spoke, is this point, which he perhaps said better than I can. A single set of decisions for a single course of education, following a child from the beginning until graduation. It simply makes sense. There was a time back in the early 70s when I was working in Boston education, looking to find a metropolitan solution to school desegregation. Didn't work. Anyway, I got to know the suburban school districts. And if I had gone to the principal of Concord, Massachusetts, which has about the population of Chittenden East, and I had said, this is silly, why didn't you have 8 school boards with 66 board members? I would have been considered certified, and would have called the ambulance. This is not a system, I think, that you would create now. Its historical origins are clear. There's still a little schoolhouse up on Underhill, for example. The schoolhouse, right on the road here. It just makes sense to unify these districts, to have a single set of decisions on education that are uniform for all the kids, and follows the child all the way through. I'd like to give, I'll wrap it up. Okay. Two responses to this. One makes that the crisis is not the time to make a decision. I disagree. If you're needing, be it money or blood, that is the time to make a decision, right there. Don't pause. The other thing is, Peter Ball wanted to know about 21st education as being very different. I'm going to give myself away. I was in school in the 1940s. Let me tell you, it's really different. That's all it is.
Thank you. We have scheduled a period of questions and comments, and I believe we're starting over here.
I'm Andrew Pond, I chair the Open School Board. There's been a great discussion, a lot of issues. The one point that I would like to make is that the folks that we have asked to look at this issue have decided, not unanimously, but very close, that this is a good thing. 14 members of the committee are in favor of the merger. School boards in the district are, for the most part, in favor of the merger. Bolton School Board unanimously is strongly in favor for a lot of the reasons that UID is. The Mansfield Board is in favor. At least 4 of the elementary boards have taken the step of stating publicly that they favor the merger. The people that we have asked, which includes me, to look at this issue, some of us for a number of years, are all in favor of the merger. I think it's important to pay attention to that, even though there's a lot of airtime given to the minority folks who do oppose it, although they do make some
Yeah, Rich Russell, I have to leave, just one comment, this seems like such a no-brainer, I'm sorry that you have to spend so much time selling this.
Go ahead.
My name's Gail Conley. I worked in Chittenden East for 11 years as a superintendent. I'm strongly opposed to this merger. I think it's an enormous historical mistake. We talk about the Mountain Mansfield Union is completely different from Mountain Mansfield. When we created Mountain Mansfield some 50 years ago, whatever the number was, each of the towns collectively said, ask Mount Mansfield, the union, to educate that grade level students. But they never gave up their responsibility for education, and they continued to be a town school district. When we vote this in, we're eliminating the town school district. We're not just eliminating the school board members, we're eliminating the town school district. So what we're giving away, and the principal spoke to it quite well, the professional working relationship between this board for this elementary school is phenomenal. And I actually enjoyed 2 meetings a month here. I think there were 6 years where we did 2 meetings a month, and they were great meetings. But the working relationship and the commitment between the town, the board members, this faculty, I think is what we're giving up, and I think for no gain. If you look now, we have a great school system. We've got kids doing great work at all levels. You can talk about disjointed. The fact that we have these separate board meetings, the central office has full authority to do all kinds of coordination and sharing of staff, and we've done that for years and years, much longer than mine. So for more than 40 years, we've done that. And what this proposal will do will give that away permanently. This is the biggest decision schools have made in more than 50 years. We're going to give up town school districts, period. There'll be no more annual school district meetings in Underhill. They won't exist. And what are we gaining? We're not gaining. We're making the superintendent's life different. I like my own life.
No, Dale, that's just really inappropriate.
All I
I'm
said
sorry,
was,
I think that you're getting personal, and I
That's
don't
what he
think that's
said.
okay.
he said,
Sorry, no, I'm sorry,
All I
John,
said
but I
is
just feel
different.
that's not okay.
all I said is different. That's what John said. John said, you're supporting him because of the superintendent. It'll change the role. That's what I'm saying. That's why we're doing it. And what we're giving up, I think, is harmful for young kids that we want to keep in our communities as long as we can. And small schools, I agree, small schools have financial penalties. They're temporary. The legislature might fix them. You know, the governor 2 weeks ago wrote a letter suggesting maybe we need to provide money for buildings to improve mergers. The Senate last year said no. I don't know what the Senate's going to say this year. No one does. But I don't think we ought to, with haste, make this kind of a huge mistake, change for very, very little benefit for students. And if the new board pulls off all those changes, it's going to be a huge increase in finances. We're going to have the enrichment that Jericho's able to provide. That'd be great to have to everybody, but if we give that to everybody, it's going to be all the taxes are going to go up. They are. So I just urge everyone to read the 44-page document. Read it twice. I believe that if every citizen read that document twice, there'll be a 75% no vote. That document is not the way we ought to be doing it. Thanks.
John?
Yeah, I would like to apologize to you, John, and the board, and to Gail for interrupting Mr. Conlon. But I think it's really important to set the record straight. Never, ever, in the last 4 or 5 years, has it ever come out of my mouth that my job is going to be easier, that the work is going to be less. It's always been about students. It's always been about teaching. It's always been about learning. It's always been about efficiencies and optimizing the resources that we have. So I think it's just really important for me to share that with you. Should not have interrupted Mr. Conley, but I feel like it's important to set the record straight.
I'd like to add on to that. My comment was not about John personally or anything that he did or did not do or say or did not say. I agree with what he said. I have not heard him make any comment, but we are hiring somebody to do this job. And at some point in the future, we'll hire somebody else to do this job. And they probably will be able to do a better job if it is structured differently.
Yeah, John, if I could just follow up just briefly on that. One of the things that really I focus on is what are our educators educational leaders spending their time. I think all of us know that our administrators and our principals and everyone in our school system, we've been blessed, Dr. Conley included, with people who were very dedicated and were very, very hardworking. What worries me about our current structure, and I certainly agree with those who say this isn't a panacea, but I wouldn't go as far as you, Andrew. I think there is a problem that needs to be addressed. And the problem is that our educational leaders can't focus on the real challenges of making students better, and finding a way in a challenging fiscal environment to actually make those tax dollars work. And that's something that's been changing a lot, with all due respect, in the last few years. I hear it throughout the state from superintendents and principals throughout the state that they're just not in a position to do their job of improving students and focusing on how we can be innovative enough to really meet the needs of our taxpayers as well. And the one other comment I want to make about Dr. Conlon's assertion, I understand that if this is approved, that there will be a difference in our governance structure, but I think the question is quite different. Right now, we have town control over parts of our schools. Because we have fragmented that governance, there's no community control over all of our schools. The question that's on the ballot is, do we finally say, let's be one community, and let's take that responsibility, and let's take control and responsibility of all our schools for students and for taxpayers.
I thoroughly agree that we are a community, it's a wonderful community to be a part of. Some of the logistics that I haven't heard discussed. Right now, at our monthly board meetings, our 5-member board has our principal there, gives us a report of the school. For this new 15-member board, will there be 9 principals at each meeting? What are the logistics, what are the realities of having 9 plus 15, 24 people sitting in a meeting? It may be fine, but I'm just saying, we haven't necessarily talked about the logistics of how we do this. Here again, if we had 6 elementary boards combined into one, and we kept our MMU board, we still coordinate 2 boards. Have we thought of everything before we really write this constitution and make it a legal document?
Some of the arguments that I think,
I'm
oh,
an
sorry,
Underhill resident.
I'm sorry.
This is an Underhill meeting, and I'm wondering why so
Let
many
her go,
residents
Peter.
are talking.
I know it is an Underhill meeting, but we haven't distinguished up to this point. So I suggest that we let other people speak also. They contribute.
Diane Kersen-Glitman from Jericho, and you're right in a sense, when you're focusing on that question about this is an Underhill meeting. And certainly you could have the dialogue just within Underhill, and if your voice isn't being heard, I want to step back and make sure it is. But we're talking, would you like to talk?
When I go to Jericho tomorrow night, do I get as much time as you get?
Since I will be there, I will make sure that happens.
Let's not have discussion in the group back. and
What I
forth.
wanted to get back to is that there will be a lot of discussion that tries to pit town against town, whether it's either financially, educational outcomes, this one's doing it better, this one's having a problem. And it's interesting because we've all admitted that we're in a statewide funding for education. We're all in it together. So to me, the bottom line is that you accept the idea that we're all in this together, all of our kids graduate together, we can work together. You either accept that or you say, no, I want to stay with this illusion of mine, even though I'm paying the money to the state. And I just want people to think about that because they're going to hear that argument a lot.
I just wanted to say, as far as the theater, when we have a new 15-member unified board, in a few years, there'll be 5 representatives from the board of directors from Jericho, there'll be 3 from Underhill. 4 from Richmond. Yes, we will all be part of the same community, but we do have our different neighborhoods, and I think it's important that we all feel like we have a fair share in the home. So I think that that is, what you're feeling here tonight might be reflected in the future if we all have a chance to really address that issue.
Yeah, I just hope, once that is left until the vote, that people on both sides don't exaggerate the pros and cons. For instance, I've heard it said that, well, in the past, the elementary school kids from Huntington would be bused up to Jericho or Underhill. I don't think that's likely. On the other hand, Michael, on one of your slides, you mentioned one budget in place of 8. But that one budget would be a very big budget. Take a fair bit of time, much more than any of our current budgets. So I would just ask that people try not to exaggerate the pros and cons.
Go ahead.
Just to answer that question, Tony and John will correct me if I'm wrong. And we have talked about this with Bob Fahey, our business manager, because everybody knows is integral to building all the budgets. And it is going to be a simplification. Sure, the data has to be assembled from all the schools. However, if you're building one budget and you have the opportunity to deal seamlessly among all those as opposed to on a separate basis have 8 of them, it is a more seamless process. Now, I don't want to oversell that as saying it's the best thing for sliced bread, but to say it isn't an improvement, I don't think that's supported by
I
our
said
data.
to me, that was explained, but they don't exaggerate the benefits. I talked to Bob about this actually. He figures it might be a 50%, might save 25 or 30% of his time. But when you put up one budget as opposed to 8, the inference is, oh, 1/8 as much. You don't state it, but people can make a connection and they make an assumption.
We have a disagreement about what I was implying, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Peter?
So, Tony's uncertain about this vote, and there's a 1-year window of opportunity to make a decision. What's the harm in waiting that year to see how well the other school districts do in merging and having a single board? And I might point out on the org chart, there's still going to be 9 other committees that are also part of that district and subject to all of the public meeting rules. So it's not like there's a giant collapse of meeting time. There's still going to be a pretty huge array of committees. What's the harm in waiting and watching to see what happens? Because we're only going to save $25 on our $100,000 assessment appraisal. That doesn't seem like much of an inducement to go fast.
Sure.
You're speaking to one community, what's the harm in watching? This is a vote for 6 districts. And if we don't take that, then there's no merger, and we don't get voices. It's kind of to say, what's the harm in voting no? It's a little bit like playing Russian roulette. Maybe no, you're the only outcome. But whether it's the same point of view, you can try to solve it. Maybe you're the
Okay, I've heard that one quite a bit, and I want to know why we have such a fine bit of argumentation here, of hidden knowledge that you know that something is imminent. And George, you also are warning, if we don't do this, bad things will happen. Where are the specifics about that? I mean, where are the specifics of the 28 peer-reviewed studies that John talked about? Why aren't we seeing that information plain and transparent here?
They're in my literature.
Here's the presentation of that. I mean, it's just all you've done is reached to an argument. It's I'm not a specialist in argumentation, but I'm sure there's a fallacy dedicated to this problem of special knowledge and having a hidden awareness. Where are the specifics? Where is the study that says that it really does save us money? Because there isn't any that I can see. Even if we close the school and magically, this is all magic, the UCS budget disappears. Still, that's only about a 5% or so change in the whole budget for the whole CES.
Tony tells me that our time for this question period is up, but I would like any presenter that wants to respond to do so as our final formal response.
John, I just wanted to quickly address the question of why not wait. It strikes me that that is an option. That's separate and apart from your viewpoint of what Montpelier will or will not do, evades the question. If the question right now squarely before us, after all of this study, all this hard work, is whether it makes sense, whether it makes sense for students, for taxpayers, and the community. I understand reasonable people can differ about that, but I think the weight of the argument is that we would be better if we do this. And we have lost an opportunity if we don't. And if, God forbid, 3 of our communities vote no, that opportunity is simply lost. The amount of energy and work it has taken us to get to this point is incredible. The likelihood that even if the legislature doesn't intervene, that there's going to be another initiative that can repeat this, I think is pretty low. I'd submit for all of us, whether you're here or at home, that now is the time to study it and make up your mind. Are we better on a unified basis or not? I submit the case is strongly there, but I'm glad we've been able to have this great debate because I think you did a great job, John, of giving us all an opportunity to get all of the viewpoints out there. So thank you.
Anybody else?
Just to respond on Peter's point, I believe that the jury's out on what Montpelier is wanting to do. Anyone who follows the Senate and House saw that there are many who are very reluctant and not ready to decide how best to fix the schools. The chair of the Senate Education Committee is not in favor of merging schools. Furthermore, some of the ideas are rather large, such as having districts that have more than one high school. Who's to say that if we just take our supervisory union and change the governance and call it a unified district, that we will meet any new criteria that the state deems necessary. The state worked hard to study this issue this year, both the House and the Senate. And in the end, they voted on nothing and they decided they needed to do more study. It's going to take some time before the experts put their heads together and decide what's best. It's a little bit arrogant of us to say we better do this now before the state tells us what to do. I think we should be part of that process. We are Vermonters, and participate participate in the state's discussion about what are the best ways to finance, educate, and equalize opportunities throughout the state. And, yes, put a tourniquet on the bleeding wound, but don't necessarily, think that that is the fix.
Okay. You either got this in the mail or will soon. It tells you some other meetings that you can go to and listen to the comments there and hopefully make comments yourself or ask questions there also. We are going to have another meeting. It's listed on here, October 28th, a Tuesday. It's within the 10 days that's required by state law prior to the vote. The Underhill board is going to gather now and decide what our format is going to be for them. And we solicit especially the presenters here and others of you to join us in helping to make that the right kind of a format for this group. So thank you all for coming. I appreciate your comments. And the meeting is not over until the board has settled on what's going to do the 28th. So gather around, folks, please.
Somebody from
That's a 360.
I'm gonna go, I don't need to stay for you. I'll just go along with that.
I just don't think that.
I would love to sit. I feel I have some.
Okay, so as you talk, I'm in favor.
Yeah, I'd be happy.
I mean, literally, so I can actually.
I told Andrew what I think.
We need a superintendent to defend the school. That's what we've been missing all these years.
Why do you want to give it yourselves?
Okay, that's not my analysis.
Which I'm very grateful. And that one, yeah.
So,
I've never seen that before. She was on the menu. Just didn't mouth out. Why you calling it? Didn't sound like that.
That's John's.
Roll it there.